His eyes opened to the sound of Alice's bedroom door squealing open. Sleep tugged at him, but his parental sense demanded that he get her back into bed. He could hear her bare feet slap on the naked floorboards as he rolled out of the warm envelopment of his blankets. He clumsily put on his slippers and stumbled out into the living room. At the apartment, she had always slept fine, even when she was a baby. It was only since the move into this house that she had started acting strangely in the night. Getting up, wandering the house, talking to her, quote, friend. The kid seemed a bit odd to invent an imaginary friend, but it was an improvement. The first few nights in the house, Alice had woken the whole neighborhood screaming. From the kitchen wafted the sound of soft weeping. He followed when was greeted by an unexpected sight. His tiny daughter, dressed in her nightgown, standing in front of the open basement door. She just stood there, looking down into the basement, quietly sobbing. He thought it was strange she had not put on the light, and even stranger that she would stand in front of the scariest place in the house, alone, in the dark. He approached her and put his hand on her shoulder gently and suggested, "Let's go back to bed, honey." Without looking or acknowledging him, she slowly lifted her arm and pointed down into the basement. Had she thought she had heard something? Was that why she was up? He let his eyes follow her finger into the blackness. Softly comforting her, he said, "There's nothing down there, honey. Let's go back to bed." Without even looking at him, she just continued to sob and point. Something felt wrong, but he had to put a stop to this behavior. She needed to feel safe in her new home and to put away all these childish fears. Explanations hadn't worked, now he had to show her. He stepped down onto the first creaking wooden step, leaned forward, and flipped on the switch. The illumination shocked his eyes, but forfeited his resolve as he heavily strode down the very bottom of the stairs. With confidence in the voice, he looked down and proclaimed, "Nothing down here, honey. I don't know what you heard, but..." Silently and abruptly, the light went out. Terror struck. He looked back up the stairs, and there his daughter stood, silhouette, no longer pointing, but standing motionless. Eyes wide, he watched the door as though it had swung by a powerful, unseen hand, swinging shut, leaving him in the most utter of darkness. He bounded up the stairs, once, twice, stopped and reached forward for the knob to escape. He reached, but his hand found nothing. He swung wildly at the wall for a switch, but found only smooth, bare wall. Gingerly, he stepped forward and continued to reach. Surely the door must be close enough to feel by now. Gingerly, he stepped forward and continued to reach. Surely the door must be close enough by now. Slowly, he took another step, his hands blindly groping into the nothingness ahead, and his feet constantly misjudging the next step. One more step, two more, 3, 4. He climbed, and his speed and panic increased. It had already been at least several floors worth of stairs. Maybe he should try to go back down. It would be easier. Remembering that the basement stairs ran under his own bedroom, he cried for his wife. "Vanessa!" His voice seemed unusually loud, as if in a confined space, and it echoed back towards him now. The echo pushed him beyond attempting to rationalize this insanity and settled any contemplation about going down. No, going down into the inky, black, echoing nothingness seemed like a very bad idea. Better to go up into the inky, silent nothingness. Cautiously and sightlessly, he resumed his climb, feeling ahead into the nothingness that outstretched his hands. So many stairs and his legs ached. He turned around and sat on the step. Alone, he felt a solitude more complete than he had ever known. Darkness, desperation, and despondency mixed in his soul as tears began to flow. "What was that?" He bolt upright and held his breath. Was that a sound? He strained his ears but only perceived the pounding of his own veins. Then, distantly, maybe like a scrape or whisper, or just air shifting, sound seemed to echo from below. Adrenaline poured into his veins and overrode his fatigue. He rose and heedlessly dashed up the stairs. Several times he had tripped and battered himself on the steps, but still he rose and charged on. Yes, he was sure now, at first barely audible, but rising steadily, a roaring, whirling white noise. It seemed to be all around him, engulfing him, drowning out all other sound and sense. Blindlessly, his senses overwhelmed, he frantically sprinted up until... Ugh! Falling. Impact. Pain. Rolling. Hurting. And breaking. It was late the next morning that Vanessa finally woke. She wrapped herself in her terry cloth bathrobe and made her way towards the kitchen. As she passed Alice's room, her maternal instincts had led her to open the door. Her mind was not awake enough to realize the incongruity of the child's room, dark with all the shades drawn, and the closet door in front of which Alice sat. "Morning, honey." No response. "What are you doing? Do you know where Daddy is?" With an uncharacteristically serious expression, Alice slowly turned her head and responded in her tiny voice, "Talking to my friend." Vanessa withdrew to the kitchen to make her coffee. It took an hour or so for her to finally open the door and find her husband's battered and beaten body at the bottom of the basement stairs. Later, the coroner would speculate that he had run flat into the closed door at the top of the stairs, had fallen back, broken his neck, and several other bones. The only really odd thing was that he was so bruised and battered from such a short fall down so few stairs.